I started in April '67, and I guess by the end of May, we knew things were things were picking up. And I can remember Leela Swift, the director, one of the three directors, and she said, you know, I think we'll go through the summer. I mean, she was amazed at thinking we'd get through the summer of '67. Well, but you know, the irony of this whole thing, Dark Shadows is actually one of the shortest-lived soap operas ever. But then, of course, there's one good reason for that is because it dealt with specific material, and we ran out of material. I mean, there are only about a dozen classic horror stories, and we did them once and twice over. So there was not very much left to do. And we kind of ran out of gas is what happened with that show. So like Guiding Light with my partner, Mary O'Leary, my partner with Clunes Associates, the Reader's Theatre thing, she works over at Guiding Light, and Guiding Light's been on the air since the 1930s. I mean, it's almost 60 years on the air, and it was on a 15-minute radio program. And then it went to television and became a half-hour thing. 15 minutes probably at the beginning, and half hour. Now they're an hour. Now they're, you know, big things. Right. But the whole concept of the soaps has changed. But anyway, Dark Shadows was very specific, and so therefore it had a short life, and that's what makes it the more amazing that it's still around, because it really didn't last that long. Soaps are on a very tight budget. That's why they don't have cars crashing all the time. They have actors talking a lot, because it's cheaper to have actors talking than to set up a car crash going through a store window or whatever. And but Dan did go for these ghost effects, and he was into chroma key a lot. And at that time, you know, this is back, I guess, in the early days. I never thought of ourselves at the time being in the early days of television, but I guess it was. Because it's ABC, the news department were always raising hell with them because they couldn't get these special cameras for their remotes. And the news, it came on at 5 or 6 o'clock, and we were sometimes still taping at 4:35 into 5 o'clock. And they couldn't get this equipment that we were using for all these special effects. And, well, you know, that's all been rectified now, I guess, with everybody has their own sophisticated equipment, but it was very sparing in those days. It certainly got a lot of publicity, I mean, the character Barnabas, I guess, became probably the most talked about character on television. But it was largely the press. The ABC press department went all out with this, and they sent me all over the country with this thing. So there was a lot of ballyhoo. It wasn't all of a sudden. It was all very gradual. I mean, that first day that Dan handed me a bunch of mail was probably the most startling thing, rather than later on when somebody said there were 5,000 letters. I was sort of aware of it at that time, but just to get any letter at all, I thought I was getting my papers, as it were, but I was getting letters from fans. I remember the first person that ever came up to me, it was on the street, and someone lived on 9th Avenue, which was right around the corner from where I lived. And it was a lady, and she said, I saw your show the other day, you're wonderful. And I remember, I'll never forget this lady right around the corner from the studio. She wasn't from California or Arkansas or anything, she was just around the corner. And she came up to me and said, you're marvelous. It was as if I was in a little local theater group. And she came up to me on 9th Avenue as I was hailing a taxi when I had to get home. And that was my first indication of anybody being remotely favorable to what I was doing. My first year in Dark Shadows was absolute hell. It really was. Every performance. It was like diving in, not ready to swim yet, but I had to dive in. And I mean, I was not totally, but half ready to do these scenes. And it was a great challenge for me. One of my best scenes was with this young rival of mine for the affections of one of the ladies in the story, and we were meeting in a tavern, and we had a conversation about dueling and the purpose of a duel. And we were, of course, both uptight with each other because we were both rivals for the affections of this one woman. And it was a very edgy kind of scene between the two of us, and we were being very polite, terribly polite, and arguing about dueling and the purpose of a duel, with all of the ominous threats of killing each other behind it all. And of course, me with my superpowers, You know, I was always a threat. So that scene was one of my favorite. Devlin was the name of the character, and it was one of the best scenes I did.